What's up, guys? Rick from DFS On Demand here with a preview for the Dell Technology Championships. If you're watching the video version of this, obviously I'm not in the studio this week. I'm on the road. And I know what you guys are thinking. Like, Rick, are you really going to make a preview video from your hotel room? Precisely. That's exactly what I'm going to do. I wanted to talk golf with you guys. Wanted to make sure I did not miss a playoff event. So if the audio or the video is a little bit weird this week, my apologies. We'll be right back at it next week. But we're going to do our best here. So let's not waste any more time. All right, so I don't really want to just kind of go down the cheat sheet like we might have done in the past. I kind of want to jump around and go through some of these tools here. I think that's much more interesting, but I want to have a quick discussion about these guys at the top here. So there's 6 guys priced over $10,000, and Rory McIlroy is the one that I'm going to want to learn more about this week. I want to kind of get a feel for how the industry is going to treat Rory, and I'll tell you why. He's the only guy priced in the top, 14 players this week who did not play last week at the Northern Trust. Obviously, Ricky Fowler didn't play last week, but he's not teeing it up here. Then you get to Henrik Stenson, who is the 15th priced player who did not tee it up last week. But basically, out of those two, Stenson and Rory, the top 23 priced guys, highest 23 priced guys, played last week. Now, you guys know this. This is a very recency bias game that we play, especially when it comes to ownership. We look back at what guys did last week, and we make decisions about this week. The general public does it all the time. So does Rory not playing last week hurt or help him? Obviously, for someone like Justin Rose and Jon Rahm, it would, well, I guess I would say it would help his ownership because it's going to get lower, but others could say it hurt his ownership because he missed the cut. So Rose and Rahm missed the cut. That will push a lot of jaded owners off. Rory didn't play, so you can kind of just make your own narrative around this, but Rory didn't play last week, and the last time he teed up before that was 50th at the PGA Championship, which is obviously not ideal if you're a Rory McIlroy. But if you look at the 3 starts prior to the PGA, it was a 6th, a 2nd, and a 12th, and Rory has already hoisted the trophy here in Boston on 2 separate occasions in the last 6 years. So if I can get a vibe on the field or on the industry for the rest of the week, I'm dying to know how everyone's going to treat Rory. Tweet me what you think if not playing last week kind of helps or hurts his ownership here. But if I think he comes in, maybe 15 to 18%, I'd be really, really stoked about that. I think a lot of owners are just going to opt to go for some of these other guys. Okay, we're going to come back to the cheat sheet, but I want to jump around a little bit just to kind of show you some cool things. So let's start with, let's see here. Let's start with course history, okay? So it's TPC Boston. We have a lot of great course history because it's been played here every year since, at least as far as I go back, right, which is 2008. And there's some interesting things to note. So what you're looking at now is the course history tool on DFS On Demand. Jon Rahm, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, where he's only played 4 playoff events, and he's basically top 5 every single one of those. They were all last year, so it's no different this year when we look back and we see that Rahm finished 4th last year. He leads the field in DraftKings points per start, obviously very, very small sample size. Henrik Stenson is 2nd on this list. Actually, I should really put these two together. So Stenson and Louis Oosthuizen are 2 and 3, 96 and 87 DraftKings points per start. They both have played this tournament 4 times, and they both are always a little weird when it comes to ownership, right? They're always kind of banged up. I think these guys are perfect fits for each other. Stenson has been dealing with injuries all year. Louis is always dealing with injuries. Stenson withdrew on Monday of last week, but by all accounts, he's going to tee it up again this week. I really like these 2 guys as kind of some GPP plays who are probably going to get lower ownership. So Henrik, looking at his course history, 4 starts, did not play it last year, but in 2016 he had a 41st, 2015 he came in 2nd, 2014 he had a 26th, and he won it in 2013. And then for Louis, he did play last year, chalked a 30th place finish up, 8th in 2016, 12th in 2015, and then his 2nd place finish, which is the one that drives up his DraftKings average, was back in 2012. So both of these guys, for me, kind of fall into a similar boat because the public treats them the same way. I'm going to probably opt to get overweight on them this week. I probably don't have to have many shares of either to be overweight on the field here. So as the week kind of plays out, we start building lineups. I'm going to try to get Stenson and Louis into some of my GPP type lineups. Probably not viable cash game plays for me, but I play primarily GPP, so kind of worth it. All right, who else is on here? Who else is kind of interesting? And you guys are kind of looking at this with me for the first time. Chris Kirk coming in here with a really nice course history. We'll talk a little bit more about him. He's won this before. He won this in 2014. Has not missed the cut in any of his 7 starts, which not actually, less guys than you would think can actually say that. So I'm opting to try to get some exposure to Chris Kirk as well. We'll talk about his ownership, or I'm sorry, his price in a bit. Okay, let's dive into a bit of the strokes gained numbers because this is where things really start to get interesting here. So let's go back to my dashboard. Let's see what we've got. And sorry, it's a little harder to jump around here. I'm on my laptop as opposed to kind of like my workstation, so it's a little more difficult to jump around. All right, so let's see what we've got going on. What I always like to do, and let me see if I can find some of these guys here, okay, is look at players who have gained DraftKings points to the field. If you watch this, you know I like to do this quite a bit because it kind of, weeds out, guys who only play weak events or guys that only play strong events. Like, it's kind of a nice little tool for me. And I'm going to go back a couple of months. I'm going to go back, let's say, till May. Let's go to April 1st. That kind of gets us more into the major season. Okay? And there's a few guys that you expect to dominate this type of stat, right? So DJ and Brooks Koepka lead the way in DraftKings points gained per start. So that's on an average basis. Both guys over $11,000. Then Justin Rose at 9,300, like guys we always talk about. Tony Finau starts to be kind of the first of these, I don't want to call them like value plays. He's $8,800. But if we look at Tony Finau, averaging 26 points over the field since April 1st, only one time, one event in that 13 event stretch has he actually lost DraftKings points to the field. It was the FedEx St. Jude back in June. And then Jon Rahm, this came up a little bit in my research. He's like been quietly very, very good. Or maybe I shouldn't say very good. He's been on both ends of the spectrum here. So he is either missing the cut like he did at the Northern Trust last week and losing 33 DraftKings points to the field, which for perspective, because I know this is kind of like a new thing that we talk about. For perspective, I have not looked this up. I'm going to assume Dustin Johnson has not lost 33 points to the field like ever. Okay, let's just real quick do this. He has not lost. How far back do I have this? I have this back to October 16 of 2016. Okay, here it is. The Memorial. June 4th, 2017, Dustin Johnson lost 34 DraftKings points to the field. Over a year ago, basically 14 months ago, and like 30 starts ago was the last time, and the only time in my database that I have here, which goes back to the start of a few years ago, that DJ lost that many points to the field. So what I'm trying to show you is really the volatility that Jon Rahm brings. So my point is he either loses 33 DraftKings points to the field like he did last week, or he gains 43 like he did the week before at the PGA Championship. Or if you go over to the Euro Tour, he had back-to-back events where he gained over 50 points on the field. The Fort Worth Invitational, 40 points on the field. My point is his averages are very, very good, but his results are very, very volatile. Not a guy I play in cash games, obviously. A guy that I would target in GPPs in a big way, especially with the missed cut last week. So as we continue to have these discussions, it seems as if I'm going to be talking myself more and more into Jon Rahm. All right, so let's go back to that April 1st time frame, which is mostly like 10 to 15 starts for most of these guys. Rahm's, top 5 on this list. Poulter shows up 7th. You get your you get your Tommy Fleetwood, you get your Rory McIlroy. Patrick Reed, I thought was interesting. He's had great success here. I'm going to flip back to the cheat sheet real quick. So Patrick Reed, who has 4 top 25s in his last 5 starts for all intents and purposes. Here's his last 3 years at TPC Boston: 6th, 5th, and 4th. Yeah, pretty good. Okay, so he's a guy that's popped up on a few different places of my research this week. All right, let's go to the actual strokes gained numbers for last week. So again, we got a lot of guys who played last week also in this field. And what I like to do is sort by strokes gained total, find the guys who gained a lot of strokes, and then look to see who has kind of like room to get to their ceiling, right? Who lost strokes putting. So Finau lost a quarter of a stroke. This is almost a little scary to say, but I'm not sure we've reached Brooks Koepka's ceiling yet. We talked about this at the PGA Championship. He went out and won it. It's kind of a similar situation here where the week before the PGA, he was losing strokes putting and was deadly everywhere else. And we kind of said something like, if he just gets back to his baseline putting, he's going to be a terror. Like he left there was 4.5 strokes out there for him or something like that. Kind of similar here, right? So Koepka, I don't know what his finishing position was. I don't have it in front of me, but basically he was like the 8th most strokes gained and lost 0.37 strokes per round. He's basically, on average, his baseline is more like gaining 0.3 strokes per round. So what's that? 0.6 of a stroke over 4 rounds. He kind of is leaving 2.5 strokes out there, or he did last week. That's the kind of ceiling that we like to tap into. Guys that scare me a little bit are guys like Adam Scott, who we all know the long putter thing. I know that his strokes gained numbers since May when he switched back to the long putter are outrageous. I understand it. I will have some exposure to him. I'm very concerned that he's going to find some regression at some point because he cannot continue to gain 2.1 strokes per round on the greens like he did last week and like he has been doing week over week. So that's a little bit scary. But, like same thing with Adam Hadwin, right? Like he requires Hadwin's a little bit different because he's not as good at a lot of the other facets of the game as Adam Scott is. But Adam Hadwin requires a hot putter to be in contention. And if he doesn't have it, he's essentially dead to the field. So those are the types of things I'm looking for. And then Patrick Reed also popped up here too. Lost a half a stroke per round last week. I don't have his baseline numbers in front of me, but I guess I can find them real quick. Let's just look up like his last I like to do 20 weeks. I think 20 is a pretty good indicator here. And then let's see if I can't find Patrick Reed. Reed is basically an even putter. So losing a half a stroke on the greens per round last week. If he gets back to just his baseline of being a neutral even putter, there's definitely room for him to find a bit of a ceiling. All right. Looking at last 20 weeks for value in terms of strokes gained, obviously, 20 weeks isn't a super long time, but it's enough that the cream does rise to the top here. But there are a few guys that kind of stand out. Bryson DeChambeau, no surprise considering he won last week. Ian Poulter, who we've talked about a lot, continues to play well. His best range was probably like the first 10 of these 20 weeks. Hasn't been as great recently, but at only $7,400, 100 player or 98 player field, 70 are going to make the cut. He's interesting. And then you kind of get into the mid eights, a lot of mid eight guys, and then Joel Dahman at 6,400, who we're probably going to have to go back to. I know he burned us last week, but I'll actually show you more about that in a second. Actually, let's just do it right now. So let's just go to the last 10 weeks, try to find a little more volatility, see if we can't find a little more value. So when you get to 10 weeks, this is where it starts to get interesting. Patrick Cantlay, and I know he's kind of like a divisive name in DFS golf because you either love the guy or you hate him, I feel like. He plays really slow, which drives people nuts, but he's really, really good. $9,000, the 4th most strokes gained in the last 10 weeks. He's been really, really good. Like, I don't know how else to describe it. He's just been really good. Snedeker also pops up here too, but you have to believe that 59 and his subsequent win that 1 week is probably, I'm not going to go look it up now and waste all of our times here. I'll tweet it out if I find it, but I assume that is making up the vast majority of his last 10 weeks of strokes gained numbers. That's kind of skewing his data a bit there. And then Dahmen continues to move up the list. Has been awesome tee to green. So real quick, I'll do Dahmen, right? Because in the last 10 weeks, his last 24 rounds, he's gaining 1.7 strokes tee to green, which is basically top 5 in this field. Yeah, 5th in this field. If we go back to last week when he burned us, he was... Let's see if we can find this guy. I'll just sort by his name, I guess. All right, Joel Dahmen, where are you, buddy? Gained strokes off the tee. Lost a ton of strokes around the green. Lost strokes putting. Lost strokes tee. Yeah, I mean, he lost strokes basically everywhere but off the tee, which is pretty uncharacteristic for him, right? So, looking for him to kind of baseline as well, where things didn't work out for him, didn't roll enough putts in, didn't play well enough, but hoping that last week was a little bit of an outlier because the 24 rounds prior to that had all been pretty good. All right, course stats here. Sorry, it's going a little longer than I expected already. Course stats here are very, very similar to, if not the same as last week. TPC Boston's a par 71. You're going to need to be able to kind of destroy the par 5s. And the strokes gained approach is again, a stat that just incredibly highly correlated for TPC Boston's success. So if you're looking for those approach guys, Stenson's number 1 on the list. And then you get Keegan Bradley, who, wow. So what do you do? Shoot a 63 on Saturday? Someone tweeted me and actually asked me if that was the best DFS round. I don't know if that meant ever. It was pretty good. It wasn't the best ever. But the point is, unbelievable Saturday, and then what? Just punts it all away on Sunday. If you're willing to kind of embrace that volatility, if you're willing to forgive and forget a little bit, he hadn't had another outstanding week, and he is number 2 in strokes gained approach. If you're looking for a little bit of value, Ches Reavie is a little scary for me, but $7,000. Okay, let's see what he's done. He's I had this up earlier. I really shortened the time frame. I did something like 4 weeks of strokes gained numbers because I'm a terrible clicker. If you're watching the video version, I am a bad clicker. I really, really wanted to shorten up the time frame here because we're at the point of the season where, if you're not trying to get out in front of some of this volatility, right? Like if you're waiting for a sample size, you're too late. You're never going to get it. I'm trying to leverage some of these situations. So I just did the last 4 weeks, which is WGC Bridgestone, PGA, Wyndham, and the Northern Trust. Some guys only have 1 round. Some guys have, some guys have played 4 rounds. Some guys have played 8. 12 is usually the most in this range. Reavie's only played 2 of these events, but he's basically 10th in strokes gained total. Getting back to that very, very elite approach game, which is what should allow someone, maybe not Ches, but someone to contend at TPC Boston. Ryan Palmer's on here, but he only played 4 rounds. That was last week. But you also get guys like Patrick Cantlay, Billy Horschel, who we talked about last week, who continues to play really, really well down the stretch here. All right, I'm going to go back to the cheat sheet because there are, I think there was a couple of values I wanted to talk about really quick before we wrap up here. Let me see if I can find them. The way that they do this, only 100 guys in the field, there has to be enough that you can construct a lineup. So Paul Casey at $7,900. He's right next to Louis Oosthuizen and right next to Brandt Snedeker. He's probably going to suck up a lot of that ownership. A 4th and a 2nd place finish last year. He's been a little more volatile than we like recently, but Casey is notoriously a very consistent player. Kevin Na, 2 top 20s in a row, 6th place finish here last year. Charlie Hoffman has won here in the past. He continues to be underpriced at $7,300. There were a couple more, I thought. Where are they? Oh, Johnny Vegas. I'm not gonna run through and pick up his strokes gain numbers again here, but if I remember correctly, I liked his strokes gain number when I did my first kind of review of this. So last week he faded a little bit as well, but ended up finishing 15th, which for a guy who's $6,700, we got a 15th place finish out of him. This year, we'd probably be pretty happy about that, or this week, excuse me. And what I liked is he was not reliant on any one aspect of his game, at least if I remember that correctly. So Johnny Vegas down here at $6,700 is a guy we've actually seen win golf tournaments before, which you can't always say about guys down here. But you're going to probably have to find some of these guys to fill out your roster. And let's see if we can find any odds discrepancies here. So the biggest discrepancy, unfortunately, is probably Adam Scott. This is kind of a situation where, are you going to ride the hot hand or are you going to fade this? Playing outside of his mind, probably putting more than he can sustain, and Vegas does not like him as much as DraftKings does. So Adam Scott 28-1 to win, which is basically worse odds than Jon Rahm, who's cheaper than him, than Justin Rose, who's cheaper than him. He's $9,400. He should probably be like 20-1 to win this, and he's 28-1, which is not great. Let's see, Tommy Fleetwood 28-1. He's in between a couple of his peers at 33-1, so he's a little bit of a value. Actually, Louis Oosthuizen pops up here. He's basically the same price as Gary Woodland, and Louis 50-1. Gary Woodland 66-1. Xander Schauffele is probably the value in the low 7,000s. His peers are anywhere between 80 and 125-1. He's 66-1. And then after that, really everyone is just 125, 150, 200, or even more if you get down towards the bottom of the list. So the bottom half's pretty good. A little bit of value in the bottom sevens. There you go. That's it. The preview for the Dell Technology Championships. Thanks for bearing with me. Let me know what you think. Tweet me. It's at DFS On Demand, or leave a comment below. Later. Good luck.